Hi everybody and welcome to Noodle Knits with Ger. As some of you know, Betsy Doodle, our D here on YouTube, has been taking her first steps in knitting, and I've kind of been encouraging her, even though I'm not the world's greatest knitter myself. I was the world's worst knitter when I was in school, but one day I saw mohair wool when I was about 19 and I had a total conversion, complete conversion to knitting, and then years later I discovered crochet and the knitting ended. But I still do a little bit of knitting, and I know Dee has been having trouble with casting on and getting the number of stitches right for this cowl that she'd love to make. Now I've had a look at the cowl pattern and it is very, very easy. It is about the simplest thing you could do. But if you're starting knitting or crochet or any kind of yarn craft, the first thing you need to be aware of is, if you're starting, use a plain yarn. I have a dark, well, it's a mid to dark blue chunky here. You can see every stitch in it. It doesn't have bobbles, it doesn't have hair, it doesn't have fluff, it doesn't have any twiddles and fiddles. It's just a plain, straightforward, chunky yarn. And the way I cast on is the way I learnt in school. And later on, a friend of mine who was more into the scientific approach to knitting showed me another sturdier way to do it. But I'll show you the way I learnt in school. First of all, you make a slip knot. Now for D, it's exactly the same as if you were starting crochet. You have this slip knot and you put it on your needle. Now I'm using size 8 needles here, so as you can see what I'm doing. You put the slip knot on exactly as if it was a crochet hook. And then you get the other needle, you pick it up. It doesn't matter what way you're holding the work. The end result is what matters in knitting and crochet. You put your needle in to the loop, wrap the wool around exactly as if you were doing a knit stitch, pull it back through and put the new loop on. Now I'll do that again. You put your needle into the loop, catch up your yarn and wrap it between the 2 points of the needle. Pull the right hand needle back, pick up your yarn and put the new loop on. And do it loosely, well, fairly loosely, because the worst thing of all is to have a tight cast on, because then you will get looser as you knit and the whole thing, it won't be a rectangle, the cowl won't be a rectangle, it'll be more like a triangle gone wrong. If you have problems doing this and it's still too tight, you have to use a bigger size needle when you're casting on, and then when you begin to knit you go back to the original size needle you're supposed to knit with. So once again, put the tip of the right hand needle into the loop, catch up your yarn, wrap it around between the two points, pull it back almost as if you're knitting, but instead of pulling the stitch off the loop, off the needle, just wrap it around and pull it back in, put it back in again. So once again, put the tip of your right hand needle into the loop that's on the needle, wrap your yarn round between the 2 points of the needle, pull the right hand needle back. Be careful not to have the wool slip off your needle. You can kind of wrap your index finger round and just push it through and put it on. I'll do it again. Like when you get used to it, you'll be able to do it without thinking. It's very like the knit stitch, the plain stitch in knitting, except you put the loop you've made back onto the left hand needle. Once again, needle, point of the needle in, wrap around, pull through, bring up your loop like this. That'll stop it from getting too tight. Put it on the needle and then don't tighten it up too much, because you can always go back in again here if it's too loose and add a crochet edging. So I'll do it one last time. In, over, through, That's the way we were taught in school. In, over, through. Now, the other way you can do it is very similar, except instead of going in here, the needle goes in, back in between the first stitch and the second stitch, between the first and the second stitch on the needle. But I don't want to complicate things, but it is, if you need a very sturdy edge, that is the way to do it. But the normal way is in, over, through, and on. Now, the other thing, I'm going to ruin everything now by saying you could always crochet the cowl if it really, really gets too much. But you can see here each stitch is different because I have used very plain, chunky or bulky yarn. Each stitch is separate, and you can count them easily. They won't split, they won't do anything funny. And then you start knitting. You go, as we were taught in school, in, over, through, and off. In, over, through, and off. In, over, through, and off. I hope this is kind of helpful. As I said, the way I cast on is very similar to the first 3 moves in the actual knit stitch or the plain stitch. In. So Dee, I hope this is some use to you. There again. It would be great if you could find somebody locally who knew how to knit. If you have a library, I'm sure there are lots of books on knitting in it. I don't know, you see, this thing about YouTube, people are hundreds if not thousands of miles away from you, and a problem like you could sort out in a few minutes if you had the person beside you is just, you know, it's very hard going. So there we are. Excuse my battered fingers. I haven't got them manicured or anything. I'll continue on to the end here. In. So that, you just keep going, turn around, keep going. And once again, as I said, you can bring in the crochet hook when you finish the cowl and tidy up the edges with a row of single crochet. So have a nice day. I hope you all survived Halloween in one piece. Bye.